like we have this keen awareness and sense of the goodness of God, and that even in the tragicness of the tragic nature of where we've been, that there's still this beautiful story that's being poured out, and that's been another beautiful thing.
Welcome to the Jesus Calling podcast. Today's guests have traveled long stretches of despair and loss, but today they're embracing what God has next for them. Pastor and author Jonathan Pitts and entrepreneur John Hill. First up, Jonathan Pitts has had a whirlwind year. Weeks after celebrating 15 years of marriage with his wife, Wynter, on a warm summer night in 2018, 38-year-old Wynter Evans Pitts passed away unexpectedly in her sleep. Wynter left behind a family of 4 girls and a thriving ministry and writing career. Today, Jonathan shares about his life with Wynter, including their final book they wrote together called Emptied, and how God is still using her creative spirit to minister to others.
My name is Jonathan Pitts, and I'm currently an executive pastor at Church of the City, which is a church in Franklin, Tennessee. It's a family of churches. There are about 6 churches total. And married my wife, Wynter Danielle Evans, and we were married 15 years. I also serve as president of For Girls Like You, and it's a nonprofit organization that's right now growing out of what was just a heart desire for her, for our girls. So that's me. If you saw me, you wouldn't know it, but I look African American. I'm brown skinned, but my mom is German. And my parents met at a place called Apple Farm, which was an old music school in New Jersey that my dad kind of grew up around and worked at. And my dad, this pretty big African-American dude, fell in love with this German, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Midwestern girl. And the rest is history. They're married over, I think, 42, 43 years now, and have 5 children. I have a twin brother, identical twin brother. I have 3 sisters. My parents, being rooted in their own identity, was the key that kind of got us through, because they basically shared that our identity, although it included our race, had nothing to do with our race. Our identity was much deeper than that. Like who we were as people was much deeper than that. And so anytime that ever surfaced as an issue or a question, whether it be middle school or high school or wherever, their assurance of their identity and their ability to kind of cascade that down to us was a huge difference maker. And I struggled some with identity growing up, because I never felt like I fit in fully with my white family. I never felt like felt like I fully fit in with my black family. I was somewhere in between. But ultimately, their hard work and labor in teaching us that our identity was not in a race or anything else that's really just something that just a part of who you are, was a definitely a helpful thing. And now what's beautiful for me is I get to actually be a person that gets to share that message, because I'm secure in who I am as well. And so that's how I grew up in a Christian home. My parents love the Lord, and that's all I knew. I always say that my testimony is that I've tasted and seen that God is good. I fell into managing in the Christian entertainment space. I managed a guy named Anthony Evans Jr., who's a singer and songwriter, and managed his music career for about 7 years, but I fell into it. He needed somebody to travel with him on the road, and so I'd travel with him from Dallas, where we had moved, to Gainesville, Texas, and all these random little towns when he was starting his career, and that would just grow. So Wynter and I met in college. I remember walking out of my dorm and seeing this girl walk by me, and I didn't know who she was, but she was beautiful to me. And so 2 weeks after we graduated from college, and June 27th, 2003, we would walk the aisle and get married, and we'd be married for 15 years and 27 days. And what's beautiful is I didn't know the gem that I was marrying then. Like I didn't know how much I was upgrading at that point. It would take me kind of years to discover just the level of woman that I married. Physically, Wynter, all of her life, she had 2 conditions. One was a heart murmur, which is called mitral valve prolapse. It's super common. It's not like, at this point, not that big of a deal to have. And then she also had what was called factor V Leiden, which was a blood clotting disorder. And those 2 things kind of worked together to always keep her at the cardiologist. And so we were at the cardiologist every year, once a year, and they basically told her every year, your heart looks fine, it's not growing, you might need a heart valve replacement eventually, but for now, like, you're good. If there's any regret that I have kind of in a 15-year, 27-day marriage, it's not realizing much sooner what I had in her. And what I like to say is that I look at our marriage in 3 phases. The first 5 years were us just realizing that we were just 2 imperfect people, 2 broken people that were bringing our brokenness into our marriage. And we had all these expectations. We drug in even just our own issues into our marriage. And so the first 5 years was discovering that those things were there and present, and having to make a decision about whether or not we were going to love each other and and stay married to each other and work through those issues. The second set of 5 years was really us making a decision and digging our heels in to say, okay, we've come in with this baggage, we've come in with our history, we've come in with all these expectations, and we're going to live an intentional marriage and an intentional life of laying those things down and emptying ourselves of those things. And that last third of life together, not only did we consider each other best friends, but I'd also we'd work in ministry together. We'd launch our ministry together, and we'd write together, and we'd be raising our girls together in a way that was just beautiful. And so I'm grateful. We just had this progression, and I think that's really, honestly, for me, like the beautiful thing of our marriage wasn't that it was perfect, but it was progressional. And because we were intentional as a couple, that we had progression in terms of our love for each other, our relationship with each other, and we just grew in depth together. And so I'm just grateful for that. But on July 24th, 2018, she was writing her last book, and I was finishing up my last week at the Urban Alternative, the organization that I'd run for the last 7 years. And I came home from work. We had actually already sold our house in Dallas. We'd already moved to Nashville, and we were staying at her cousin's house, Priscilla. She had a house that she had moved out of that was still furnished, so we were staying there. And she texted me and said, I don't feel good, but I really need you to step up tonight because I need to get this book done. So I knew that she was just wanting to get this book done, kind of had that deadline on her. And so I just came home. It was a normal night for us in the sense that, in the summertime, like when our kids are home and we're working, she would have like this need to just kind of lay down for a little bit. So she went and laid down. I came home, I cooked dinner, and I knew she was going to write that night. And so she laid down, and I prepared dinner, and I went in the room and said, hey, babe, do you want to eat? She's like, no, I just think I need to lay here a little bit longer. And so I went back out, finished dinner, and basically the bottom line is, as she was taking a nap, she had some sort of a heart rhythm issue, and that heart rhythm issue would basically give her an irregular heartbeat that wouldn't be sustainable to sustain her life. But what I'd love to think about for her is that she really left this earth as peacefully as she lived in it. Her heart stopped like in a moment, and her brain would have stopped receiving oxygen, and she left the earth in a hurry. And although I didn't get to say goodbye to her, in some ways I'm really, I think, grateful for that because, to know that she didn't really suffer and that she would just leave with very little pain and ease just makes me feel really, really thankful. David served the purposes of God for his generation, and then he fell asleep. And I just had this certainty about the fact that Wynter served the purposes of God for her generation before she fell asleep. So spiritually speaking, I believe that's what happened, that Wynter accomplished her mission and God called her home.
The day Jonathan laid Wynter to rest was one of the hardest in his life, but he found comfort in the pages of one of Sarah Young's devotionals, Jesus Always, when an old mentor sent him the July 29th entry. Jonathan reads it for us now.
I'm training with patient endurance. This lesson is not for the faint-hearted. However, it is a rich blessing, one aspect of sharing in my kingdom and my suffering. Since my kingdom is eternal, it is of infinite value, and I've made it clear that sharing in my suffering is necessary for sharing in my glory. Moreover, this experience produces real benefits in the here and now, character. So make every effort to welcome the very problem you dread. Bring it into my presence with thanksgiving and acknowledge your willingness to endure it as long as I deem necessary. Ask me to take this dark, ugly thing and transform it into something lovely. I can weave bright, golden strands of glory into the most heart-wrenching situations. It may take a long time for the lovely pattern to emerge, but this waiting can build patience. Rejoice, beloved, for I am polishing your character till it shines with the light of my glory. And it was like God was telling me directly, I'm training you in patient endurance, so just hold on. And it was beautiful, beautiful. I'm one of the most pragmatic guys you'll probably ever interview. I remember thinking within hours of her passing away, okay, I got this. Not I got this, things are going to be perfect, but I got this, I can do this. Almost pick yourself up by your bootstraps. You got 4 girls to raise, you got this, you've got that. So my mind went really pragmatic right away. And so one of the things my counselor said to me, he said, look, Jonathan, he's like, the bottom line is, he's like, some people have a tendency to stay in the past and to belabor what they've lost, and other people have the tendency to run forward. And he's like, your tendency is to rush forward. And he's like, but God exists in the present. So you need to remain in the present. That's the only place you can be with him. And that's the only place you can really live and live in reality. And so for me, grieving well means living in the present and not trying to run down the road too far and think about, okay, what's next here? What's next there? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? So in a lot of ways, for me to grieve well has meant for me to intentionally slow down. And the beautiful thing about him telling me that, as I realized right away, is that me doing that would allow my girls to grieve even better, because with me being present, that allows me to be there for them. The beautiful thing for me, although I'm really pragmatic, I've always valued what I've had in Wynter. And so for me to talk about her life, I love to honor her. And what's funny about Wynter is she was a creator. So she created her ministry for Girls Like You, and all of her writings were all out of this desire to create. And she never had a desire to carry on and manage ministry. And so for me, the greatest honor I have is doing what I've always done for her, which is kind of be the backbone of her ministry and be the consistent non-creator voice in the background, just kind of pragmatically managing the things that need to keep going. And what's beautiful is that her legacy is rich and large, and her magazine for Girls Like You and her writings, her 10 books that she's written, all that gets to be carried on. What's funny is, we're doing all these resources for parents, and we were doing that out of our own need as parents. And the marriage book really came the same way. It was this deep desire to honor God with our marriage that we feel like He gave us. But when our publisher asked us to consider writing it, we were kind of not that we weren't interested, but we just didn't feel qualified. And they basically said, well, we don't want you to write a how-to. We want you to join us on the journey. Just write about your marriage. You guys are real people. You've already written about real stuff with your parenting journey. Can you do that with a marriage book? And so we prayed about it, and we said, all right, we'll do that. And so it really was just our story. So it's been as hard as it's been. There's been a lot of sorrow, but there's been a ton of joy that's been coupled with it. And so I'm really grateful for that.
You can learn more about Wynter and Jonathan's ministry, including their book Emptied, at forgirlslikeyou.com. Stay tuned for our conversation with John Hill after a brief message about the 2019 CMA Fest television event. CMA Fest is proud to present a 3-hour country music special hosted by Thomas Rhett and Kelsey Ballerini with special guest host Bobby Bones. Sunday, August 4th at 8 p.m., 7 p.m. Central. 4 days of superstar performances with country favorites like Carrie Underwood, Tim McGraw, Rascal Flatts, Blake Shelton, and many more. You won't want to miss 4 days of these superstar performances jam-packed into a 3-hour television event. Check it out on Sunday, August 4th at 8, 7 Central on ABC. For more information, visit cmafest.com. John Hill's energy is infectious. Talking to him today, you'd never know the man who built the Good Contractors List, a thriving business in Dallas, Texas, would have been at the end of his rope. After years of struggling with his faith and his purpose in the world, John felt defeated and hopeless. One freezing night in 2011, God gave John the ultimate choice, one that would change John's life forever.
My name is John Hill. I am the founder of the Good Contractors List in Dallas-Fort Worth. Just a father and a husband and just your average guy that God's been using in a different kind of way. I've loved the Lord since I was a very small child. I was adopted at birth, raised in a small Pentecostal church, and pretty much was there every time the doors were open. We lived in a small town of Henrietta, Texas, and so I had a very normal childhood though, and very protected, raised in church. By the time I reached my teens, I'd had such a wonderful relationship with God as a child, and I felt His presence and all that stuff. But whenever I really started thinking about sin, I realized that I was never going to live up to the potential that I was hearing at church. Some people have different experiences, but I'm kind of this black and white thinker. It's a roller coaster. Sometimes you're really good, and when you're on, and you're I'm going to be a minister. I'm going to do all these things. But when I was off, I decided I was off, and so. As a teenager, I started kind of falling away from God, realizing that if it's black or white, there's no way I'm ever going to make it to heaven. So I spent a lot of time going in and out of relationship with God because it was all based on my own flesh and my own what I was able to accomplish in that time frame. I ended up being divorced 3 times. I never did keep a good job. It was just, after I got out of the Navy, I tried to get into sales and some different things and could never get on my feet. Just different things happened, and then I would soar to the bottom. There's my roller coaster, highs and lows. And back in 2011, I was probably at one of my lowest points as far as feeling like I had any value to the world. I'm all but homeless. I'm living with my girlfriend that I had just met 6 months prior online, and had been living with a friend before that because I'd lost my house after my third divorce. Everything I owned fit inside my little two-door coupe car. I'd been, I was just at the bottom in my mind, and I remember just praying, God, will you just take me off this planet? I am so sick of being a disappointment in life. I'm just sick of it. I don't want to be here anymore. Will you just take me? And I prayed that for 2 months. February of 2011, he gave me that opportunity, and I was outside smoking a cigarette, and I started feeling like this heaviness. There was a big freeze that hit Dallas Fort Worth at that time around the Super Bowl, and it was so nobody was getting around. It was frozen streets and all that. But I was thinking it's probably I shouldn't be smoking, and maybe it's I'm starting to get pneumonia or something. I started coughing up fluid, and that's kind of gross, but it turned to blood. So they admitted me to the hospital for pneumonia about 3 o'clock in the morning after my family had already went home and everything. I'm laying in the hospital. They're trying to give me these breathing treatments, and it's making things worse. So the doctor finally says, we need to do some more tests. This doesn't look like pneumonia to me, because apparently I'd had a massive heart attack hours before, and now they were calling the cardiologist in. It was going to take over an hour for him and his team to make it into the hospital because of the ice. I don't think that they were expecting me to live. I was like, I feel like I might just fade out and go away, and about that time, as I'm kind of thinking this, the Lord spoke to me again. A very, very clear message. It was a simple question. John, do you want to stay or do you want to go? That was it. And it was like, it's your choice. But I kind of felt in my heart that if I stayed, that I had a purpose. So I struggled with it because remember, I'd been praying for a couple months really to die. I didn't want to be here anymore. And here's my chance. I felt peace. I didn't think it wasn't going to hurt. I was just going to fade out, and I was going to be gone. But at that time, I was still kind of questionable about whether I was a Christian or not, because I had been introduced to so many thoughts and so many questions that nobody could answer. And the more I laid there, the more I said, I finally just told God, I said, I don't know if I'm a Christian or not. I don't know. All I know is that it's like, that your life flashes before your eyes. And I just remembered how much I loved him when I was a child before I knew anything, and so I just want to love you like that. That's what I want. I want to love you like that. I don't care what anybody else says anymore. I just want to love you like I loved you when I was a kid, before I knew what sin was, before I knew what all this stuff was. I want to love you like that. I said, if I stay, I want to be remembered for doing something good. That was my number one thing, is like, up until this point, I've done nothing of value. I've done nothing that I see that has made a difference in anybody's life. I asked him, I said, I want to live every day, not just be alive. Because I think a lot of us just kind of go through life disappointed all the time of what we don't have or what we can't do. And I'm just like, I just want to live. I want to enjoy my life and stop this stress where I'm always trying to either make more money or, whatever I think is going to make me happy. I just want to be happy where I'm at with what I have, and I want to live every day. I want to touch as many people as I possibly can the rest of my life. I want to make a difference in the world. Whenever I got out of the hospital, all I knew was I have a purpose. God kept me here for a purpose. He said, so be it. I believe him. I didn't have a clue of how I was going to make it happen. All I could say was I had to depend on listening every day. What do you want me to do? After I got out of the hospital, I was working for a direct mail place that those coupons you get in the mail that's in the envelope. I was a company called Money Mailer, and I had a plumber that came up to me and was saying, he didn't think he could afford to do the big one by himself, so he had a couple of other contractors that he trusted, and he was a trusted guy. Everybody knew him. He said, I could share an ad with these guys. So I started thinking about it. I was like, you know what? If I were able to get a plumber, an electrician, a roofer, and all these different contractors together that they trust each other. The good guys kind of knew the good guys. If I put them on one website, then they could all afford to buy a bigger ad from me here at Money Mailer. And then God kept me up at night, just saying, "This bigger than that, John." And I kept laying there thinking about it, and I'm like, I knew how to build little simple websites. Maybe I could build this website, and I could charge them to be on it. Never ran a company before, never managed anybody, but I felt like I was supposed to start this organization, this company. And I got online, and I had been talking to a contractor, one of the last ones I had talked to, and I said, it's kind of like being part of a good contractors list. And that name kind of zinged me again. I was like, ooh, the good contractors list. That sounds like a great business thing. I'm like, surely all those domain names are taken. All the good ones are taken by now. Every form of it was available in .com, which just blew my mind that no one in the nation who had contractors lists, they were all over the place, came up with good contractors list. I mean, that was the most obvious name in the world to me, as a place where you'd find good contractors. I was a part of an organization called C12. It's a kind of a Christian businessmen's organization. I tried to get in it really early. I was trying to find like-minded business owners who wanted to, bring glory to God in their business and stuff like that. So I started searching around online for a group, and I found this C12 group. And one of the first meetings I was at, I just, I already went in there with this open heart of how can I use my business. And I knew I was buying these radio ads. I felt like God was saying, we can use that medium to get the gospel out there. The only thing I'm going to say is this was brought to you by the Good Contractors List, and the rest of the ad would be a gospel message. And so I started writing these little messages I felt God was giving me. I ended up with 12, one that lasts a whole year. To play every month, and they were 54 seconds long. And so we started playing Word of the Month on a secular station first. There are people hearing the gospel on secular stations, millions of people hearing the Word of the Month. So am I a minister? You can't call me a pastor, and I don't know. I'm Forrest Gump, just doing what God tells me to do, and the gospel is going out, and millions are hearing it. One of my Word of the Months I dedicated to Jesus Calling, because I felt it. I can only do so much in a 54-second ad, but if I can get people to get to Jesus Calling and start reading some of those things, they will sense the sincerity of Jesus's heart. Here's a reading from Jesus Calling on January 9th. I am with you and for you. When you decide on a course of action that is in line with my will, nothing in heaven or on earth can stop you. You may encounter many obstacles as you move towards your goal, but don't be discouraged. Never give up. With my help, you can overcome any obstacle. Do not expect an easy path as you journey hand in hand with me, but do remember that I, your very present helper, am omnipotent. Much stress results from your wanting to make things happen before their times come. One of the main ways I assert my sovereignty is the timing of events. If you want to stay close to me and do things my way, ask me to show you the path forward moment by moment. Instead of dashing headlong towards your goal, let me set the pace. Slow down and enjoy the journey in my presence. Right from the beginning, I said it has to be different than anything that's out there. It can't be just me saying they're good. I've got to have some skin in the game. So I came up with this. If the job's not right, we'll pay to fix it. A $10,000 guarantee to the homeowner that if that contractor doesn't do what he's supposed to do, we'll get physically involved. And if he can't fix it or he won't fix it, then we take him off the list. We take responsibility for it, and we pay to fix it. Everybody thought I was nuts. They're like, no way will that work. You can't trust contractors. But I had a system now, and the good guys always do their very best to do what's right. And I believed enough that there was enough people out there that were honest that they would support and make sure that this list stayed available to people. And the only way to do that is to always do the right thing. And amazingly enough, now we have about 240 contractors that we've gotten. I feel like if we could get out of the way and let God just do what he wants to in us and just trust that he's going to show us what the next steps are, we would do some amazing things. But we just get in that we really do get way too involved in trying to help God. God doesn't need our help. He needs our obedience. I want to follow God and go wherever he takes me. And he built this company, and there's no doubt you can't look at the weak vessel that he used to create it and say that guy was sharp enough, had enough clout, or there was nothing but God in me. So take those bad things that's happening, take those things that you feel like you're just being held back. When you're being held back, there's a purpose behind that. When you're being transported forward, pushed forward through the Holy Spirit, there's a purpose for all that. Just go with the flow. Let God do his work in you.
If you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you can find one of John's contractors at thegoodcontractorslist.com. Since the time of this interview, John has learned the health of his heart has declined, though his doctors marvel at his energy and spirit. If you're willing to lift John up in your prayers, please do so as he faces the next steps with his health. If you'd like to hear more stories about how God can restore life to us, even after pain and loss, check out our interviews with Brett Swain of The Cookery and Next Door graduate Sherry Taylor. Next time on the Jesus Calling podcast, we speak with adventurer extraordinaire Bear Grylls, star of the TV series Man vs. Wild. When we spoke with Bear, he reflected on the way faith has sustained him through his life and how, in his later years, he has learned to understand even more of God.
Faith at its heart is say, I'll pick you up when you're broken, and I love you and you're forgiven, and here is home, and here is strength, and here is peace. Let's do this journey of life together.
Do you love hearing these stories of faith weekly from people like you whose lives have been changed by a closer walk with God? Then be sure to subscribe to the Jesus Calling Stories of Faith podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you like what you're hearing, leave us a review so that we can reach others with these inspirational stories. And you can also see these interviews on video as part of our original web series, with a new interview premiering every other Sunday on Facebook Live. Find previously broadcast interviews on our YouTube channel, on IGTV, or on JesusCalling.com/video.